Well, welcome to Beyond Addiction, a podcast produced by Gulf Breeze Recovery and brought to you by your host, Ann. And I have a wonderful guest with me today who's a graduate from Gulf Breeze Recovery. Graduate means that Kat has been through the Gulf Breeze Recovery program and has agreed to talk to us about that and her journey since leaving Gulf Breeze Recovery. So, Kat, tell everybody who you are.
Thanks, Ann. My name is Kat. I am from Nashville, Tennessee. I came to Gulf Breeze to go through the program in 2016, completed that successfully. I lived locally in the area there for a few years, and then within the last 2 or 3 years, my husband and I moved back to the Nashville area, and I have an almost 2-year-old.
That's amazing. And that was a big goal, as I understand, to not just move from recovery, but move to being healthy.
Absolutely.
So talk about that a little bit. Talk about that transition from being a person in recovery to a person who's healthy.
So, my addiction was all-encompassing. And so not only was I a person who used drugs and alcohol in a way that was unhealthy and unsustainable, but truly the using, the figuring out how to get money to use, everything involved in that lifestyle, it took up my entire life. It was my entire personality. And so for me, getting clean wasn't just about putting down the drugs. It was about figuring out who I was, who I wanted to be, what kind of life I wanted to live, because I spent almost a dozen years in active addiction, and from the time I was an adolescent. And so I had no concept of what a healthy life looked like. And I had no concept of what I even wanted for myself. And so it's really been this beautiful process of starting. It sounds bad starting from nothing, but it was actually glorious because I got to do this like paint by number, build a life, and put all the things that were good for my spirit into it. I got to literally build myself into the kind of woman that I wanted to be when I grew up. And I definitely got the tools to do that at GBR.
Well, that's the point. I mean, you did it. It's you. It's your doing. It's your understanding and your motivation. But how did Gulf Breeze give you a jump start or a lift to get to that place? Because you were sorely not there when you came. So what did they do? What was the thing that got you to go, aha, I think I've got the things I need to do this?
So Gulf Breeze was not my first treatment center, and it was not my first attempt at recovery. I had, actually, I went to my first 12-step meeting when I was 17, and I got to Gulf Breeze when I was 28. And so I tried many things in that time period. And the thing at Gulf Breeze that was so different is that every other facility that I had been to gave me a list of action items. It was very much a doingness. You need to wake up at this time, go to these groups. When you get out, you need to do this many meetings in this time period. It was a list of steps, which was fine, and they were all good things. They were all things that were conducive to recovery. But the problem was I wasn't able to figure out how to make my own list of things that worked for me. I wasn't really able to make any independent choices when those things were not available to me. And so what Gulf Breeze did for me was really teach me intimately about the nature of my own thinking and my own wisdom. And so what I got to learn was how my thoughts were creating my own experience, how to tell the difference between egoic and chaotic thinking and something that was coming from my own wisdom. And so I was able to, what's funny is today I choose to do a lot of the things that I was taught in early treatment centers just because I think they're really fun and they give a lot to my spirit, and I find a community that I can give back in. But I do it from a place of this is something that moves me. This is something that I feel drawn to do versus this is a list of steps that someone is making me take. And that's really what I got from GBR is how to be still and listen for that voice of wisdom and trust it.
Yeah, that's really a very compelling description, because you previously talked about the energy and the time and the effort put into maintaining your sobriety when you tried, and then you were given a lot of things to do and run and go after to maintain it. So you were still kind of on this treadmill. And what you're describing is a unique, special, where you were allowed or learned how to sit with yourself.
Right.
And so, how do you keep that going now?
So it's so difficult to even talk about because there's really just this feeling. My I go through seasons in recovery, but right now one of my big mantras is what is joyful to my spirit is painful to my ego. And so I spent all of my time using avoiding pain, right? Seeking relief. I have an uncomfortable feeling. I don't want to be in the situation that I'm in. I don't like the way that things are going. And so I'm going to anesthetize this pain with something that I know works, which for me was drugs. And it's really fine tuning my awareness of what level of discomfort is appropriate and even beneficial to me, and what types of discomfort should I try to avoid. And so now I look for those things. Most people can recognize that in deferring rewards. You know what I mean? I'm not going to do this thing that feels good today so that I can have greater reward down the road. But for me, for many years, I couldn't tell the difference between what was deferring a reward for something greater and what was just absolute, futile discomfort. And so, like, that's the difference for me, right? Is just fine tuning that skill of, I feel this uncomfortable feeling, but this is something that's guiding me to something greater. And so rather than try to put a drink or a drug or a cigarette or a donut, or, I mean, I could put anything on that just to not be in that moment of discomfort, I'm going to lean in because it's leading me to something that's truly joyful to my spirit.
That's great. I mean, whether you have a problem with alcohol or not, some people do it with shopping, some people that do it with, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to mask a feeling of discomfort instead of working through it. So, do you have a regime? I don't know the right word. Do you have a regime or a practice or a guide for you today?
I do. And actually, I am very structured today. I haven't, I just celebrated 7 years of recovery this month. And at various times in my journey, I've been alternatingly kind of loosey goosey and then more structured. And again, that's really just being guided by my wisdom and figuring out what I need at this season in my life. But I think I mentioned I had a child a little under 2 years ago, and I suffered greatly with postpartum depression. I mean, I had a really dark year to 18 months, and I didn't want to live that way anymore. And so I did. I got quiet, and I thought, what fills my spirit? What do I want to do? And I heard someone say, hope is not a strategy. And I was like, ooh, yes, you're absolutely right. So if there's something that I want to build into my life, I need to schedule it. And so I've been incredibly structured as of late. I get up earlier. I don't touch my phone until I get to work. So I read, I take my dogs outside without any technology. I have a spiritual moment. I do go to meetings 3 times a week right now. I go to the same ones every single week because community is so important to me. So I see the same faces and I connect with people. I've gotten back into a physical activity routine where I also go to the gym at the same time on the same days every single week. So I see the same people and I have that level of accountability. And I'm really just building back into my schedule the things that I know from experience make me fulfilled. And so, really, with no one saying, I guess that's what I was trying to get to earlier is it doesn't have anything. There are lots of things that I can do to create a feeling of fulfillment. But I don't necessarily need someone standing over my shoulder saying, you must do this. It's really having that self-awareness to sit quietly and say, gosh, I'm drawn to this right now. This is something that's meaningful at this point in my life.
That's so impressive, Kat, because it's not easy with a 2-year-old to have
No.
any kind of schedule, right?
Right. Well, she's pretty scheduled now. She wasn't for the first year. She was just freestyling her whole first year of life. Slept when she wanted to, cried when
Wow.
she wanted to, but they do get into schedules a little later, which is great.
Well, you mentioned postpartum. There was a time when I was having kids, you didn't even acknowledge, I don't even think we had the word. We didn't even acknowledge it. And I, I'm, I wonder if someone hearing and watching this would wonder, was that a time when you were tempted to take a strategy that you used to take many years ago and give up on sobriety?
Yeah, for me personally, no. I was very open to the fact that I might have that experience. I certainly don't think that I'm above or beyond any kind of thought to do something that would be destructive for me. But I have to tell you, I really, um, my journey in this started at GBR 100%, but I have absolutely lost the fear of a feeling. And that doesn't mean that a 12-month deep, dark hole of depression was fun, because it was awful. It was awful. But what I did not have before that I have today is this absolutely unshakable faith that this feeling is temporary, this feeling is natural, this feeling is serving a purpose. And if I just keep doing just the next right thing, just check in here, what is it that my spirit needs? Keep moving toward that. And I just do that next right thing, one thing at a time, that there's no way I won't move out of it. I mean, I heard there's an author that I was introduced to at Gulf Breeze who I heard speak one time, who talked about, he was talking about the human condition and how at one point he thought it was like a Christmas ornament, right? Beautiful, but if it hit the ground, it would shatter into 1,000 pieces and you'd never be able to put it back together again. And then as he grew in his understanding, he thought, gosh, no, maybe we're more like an orange, just tough on the outside. If you throw an orange against a wall 100 times, it'll still look the same, but open it up and it's a big old mess. And then as he got, acquainted with the principles and the understanding that they teach at Gulf Breeze, that he came to realize that, in fact, we were more like a racquetball. Because, baby, I was made to bounce. And I am just as good on the 100th bounce as I was fresh out of the package. And the only way that I came to that understanding was that I had to let myself hit the ground emotionally, spiritually, physically. And every single time I have hit the ground in recovery and I don't put a drink or a drug on it, I come back up. And so allowing myself to hit that ground, metaphorically, so many times has created this truly this unshakable faith that I will come back up. And so again, I don't want to be so egoic to say, oh, I'm immune to a feeling of wanting to use ever again, because I know I'm not. It's a thought's a thought. They're not personal. However, it just doesn't seem like a solution that I'm interested in anymore.
Wonderful, because what you're describing is resilience. And
Absolutely.
yes, and that is a word that I certainly knew, but never felt as familiar with as when I got involved with the folks at Gulf Breeze, because resilience is something incredibly strong, but it's like any other muscle. You have to use it, you have to practice it, and that's what you're describing.
That's right. And I think too, that's a big difference at Gulf Breeze is that, um, I've been in therapy since I was a child. And I don't know if I was hearing it wrong or if the practitioners that I was seeing were saying it this way, but I was always under the misconception that a feeling, particularly a negative one, is something with which I needed to cope. If I am experiencing discomfort, that is a sign that something is wrong. I am doing it wrong. My life is wrong. Things are going wrong. You need to shut it down. But in fact, being in those uncomfortable feelings is the space from which we come back up. I was never able to find my own resilience until I was able to lean in to that thing that I had been running from.
Right. And you referenced the books. There were so many books that I was borrowed from the Gulf Breeze Recovery Library. And the whole concept of this resilience. And who was I forgot the name of the book that I like so much with the horse on the cover, where the gentleman
Michael
spoke.
Singer, The Untethered Soul.
The Untethered Soul. That was so, because he figuratively described if there was somebody sitting on the sofa next to you saying, you're a jerk, you're lousy, you can't do this, you need to give in, this is what, you get out of the room.
Yeah.
And it just was a perfect example. Are there things that you even think back on at Gulf Breeze now that you're like, oh, I remember that?
Oh, all the time. All the time. I was actually just talking to someone last week about one of the counselors that led group. I struggled, which in a way that I think is not at all unique, with really negative and punitive self-talk, where I just had this constant running dialogue that was telling me that everything that I was doing, thinking, or saying was wrong. I mean, to the extent that when I stopped using drugs, went into treatment, and had to be in a social situation, my internal dialogue would be like, you're saying it wrong. You don't know what they're talking about. Don't try to jump in. You're terrible at small talk. What are you doing with your hands? Your hands are just drifting up from your sides. No one does that. Put them down, but not in your pockets like that. You're so weird. I mean, just constant with very basic things. But I had this misconception that there were so many things that I had done that, when laid against my own moral compass, were objectively wrong, that I thought that it was only right that I beat myself into the ground over them. Because if I'm not being self-punitive, how will I learn? And so I was talking about this, I got a lot of messaging at Gulf Breeze about showing myself some grace and showing some compassion and giving myself a break and a chance to recover. And I finally said in a group one day, if I let myself off the hook, I'm giving myself permission for all these terrible things I've done. I am beating myself up the way you spank a child. Like, so I learn that, so I do better. And the woman leading group said, that's interesting. I understand that. How is that working? And I thought, wow, it hasn't worked at all. That's been my strategy for so many years, and it's not effective. And so her terminology was compassionate curiosity. Could I treat my own thinking and behavior with compassionate curiosity? Could I pull it out and say, oh, that's so interesting. Why are we thinking that? Why are we doing that? Oh, sweet thing, you've been through so much. Let's take that out and look at it a little more closely. And that was so foreign to me that it felt very strange, and it felt wrong. It truly felt wrong. I felt like I was condoning a lot of the negative actions that I had taken, but it's really transformed the way that I move through my life. And as a matter of fact, I have a little sister who at the time was like 12 years old, and I would lay my thinking, my internal dialogue, into a conversation with her. And I would think to myself, if my youngest sister came home and said, hey, I walked into this group of people and they were all talking about something, and I was, so self-consumed that, I said something really dumb and they all looked at me. would I look at her and be like, yeah, you're an idiot, and they were all laughing at you, and then expect her to be able to move through the world with confidence, motivated towards change behavior? I would never. I would never. So why was I expecting that of myself?
Really, really good. Very good. Tell me, what's the best thing about sobriety? In your words, what's the best outcome? What's the best two, three, one, whatever it is? Because I know there's a husband and a daughter that can't be dismissed from this
Of course.
equation. But what is it for you that's the best thing?
Honestly, I mean, my husband and my daughter are amazing, but I wouldn't even be able to enjoy them without, like, all the gifts of recovery that I've gotten, the best ones you can't see. And it's interesting, the very best thing about recovery is the thing that I was so scared of about life, is this ability to really um, feel and dive into the complete range of the human experience, joy and grief and hope and anger and all of the things. I get to experience that from the minute I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. And I was terrified of that, but really, like, that's the juice of life. Even because I haven't had a 100% easy journey since I got out of Gulf Breeze. I've lost my grandfather. um, my husband and I had a lot of trouble conceiving our daughter, and we actually lost 3 pregnancies. And I was able to be present and a part of that grief in a way that honored those babies. You know what I mean? Like, no, it's not fun to be in that feeling, but that was the feeling that my experience deserved. And there's something that's so beautiful in that. I got to show up in my own life even when it didn't feel good. And it's moving through life in that way gives me a sense of self-confidence that I was never able to have before. And so really, I mean, I think that's the key for me in recovery, is just not being afraid of my own experience. I am comfortable being uncomfortable. Um, and then I'm also here for all the joy.
You're right, 100% clear, conscious, and capable. That's wonderful. So, having that experience, what would you say to somebody who's struggling and looking for a solution and looking for a rehab or looking for some help? What would be your guide?
So, I know that when I was using I've heard a lot of people share that they were not really, they hadn't accepted that they had a problem and needed help. That was not my experience. My experience was I sat on the floor of my shower at 17 years old crying, trying to decide whether I was going to take my own life or tell my mom I needed help. And then I stayed using for a long time after that. And I knew every single day that I woke up, I swore, okay, we're going to do it different today. We're not going to do the same thing we did yesterday. And every single day I broke my own heart. And so I needed no, I needed no coaxing that I needed to get help. Um, for me, it was believing that I was capable of doing anything different. And so the idea of going somewhere felt really scary, because I thought, what if I do this big thing? What if I do this hard thing? What if I go through all this discomfort for nothing? I've done the same old thing over and over and over again. What is going to be different? Um, and I did not find Gulf Breeze for myself. I actually had a family member who went through Gulf Breeze um, and was very successful. And then my mother found out about it through his side of the family. And so she said, it's different. It's different than anything that you've ever done. And if you want something different, you should do something different. And I had a really hard time moving into that, just because I had no confidence. I had no confidence in myself. I could not see the finish line. And because I couldn't see the finish line, I had a hard time just getting to the starting line. But my experience was that I had to leap first. and then the net appeared. I couldn't wait until I saw the net before I jumped. And so, for anyone that is considering a change, the worst thing that could happen, it's not any worse than the day-to-day reality that you're living right now. It's miserable. It is absolutely miserable to be a slave to a substance. And I'm not going to lie, going through detox is uncomfortable. It wasn't terribly uncomfortable at GBR. They took really great care of me. But the uncomfortable part was that I got reacquainted with a self that I decided was not worthy of love or knowing. And I got to be face to face with this person I've been running from for so long. And there's a great deal of fear and discomfort there. But God, she's so worth knowing, you know? It is the biggest, bravest, most sacred choice you will ever make in your life. And sometimes you just have to do it even when it's scary.
Right. I'm always so impressed with you, Kat, and what you went through and what you came to. And when you think about all those years, I mean, really, you were chasing that for far longer than you've been who you are today.
Mm-hmm.
So to give up that practice, that thing, that struggle to do something different is not an easy task. And I can't even imagine doing it myself. I'm so impressed. But like you said, if you don't do it, what have you got left?
Well, and it's a skill. It is. I feel like courage is like a muscle, and we get to work that. And the experience of doing that at Gulf Breeze has set me up to do that in every other area of my life. I'm not kidding when I said that like the greatest gift of sobriety is this full and meaningful experience of life, but the lessons that I learned in the early part of my journey in treatment have carried me to, I have a family, I have a child, I run a business, I bought a home, all the things that I thought that were like markers of success. I got to have all of those, but not without taking risk. There have been opportunities that have come across my path so many times where I've said, I am absolutely scared out of my mind. I have no idea how to do this next thing, but someone thinks I can do this thing. So I'm going to leap. And the net has always appeared. And you know what? When it hasn't, and when I have hit the ground, that's where I found my resilience. Like nothing horrible happened. I came right back up and got another chance to try something else. But I never let myself know that until I got clean.
Wonderful. Now, given you've just had so much stuff that's wonderful for people to have a chance to hear, and I'm so thrilled that you were sharing this. I know somebody's going to get something very positive from this. I know I am. Is there something that you wish you had been able to say that I didn't ask you, or something that you'd want the listener to know from the depths of where you are? Because you're in so much, life isn't easier for you. You're just in such a good place. So what is the thing that you'd want someone to know that you maybe haven't said, or you want to say differently?
This is not original, and I really like to attribute when I quote things, but I don't know where this came from, so forgive me for that. But you will never be able to hate yourself into a version of yourself you can love. And the most loving thing that anyone who is struggling with addiction can do for themselves is to just set down that burden and let someone else carry it for a minute. Just reach out for help so that you can sit still for long enough to let all the good stuff soak in. And so, if there is someone watching that's in that self-loathing, that's in that self-hatred, that doesn't know what the next thing is, just reach out. Just reach out. Do something loving for yourself, because you are not going to be able to punish yourself better. You are not going to be able to hate yourself better. It just doesn't work.
Well, that was perfect. I'm glad I asked, because that was a perfect close. Kat, thanks so much for
Thanks
this.
for asking me, Anne.
this time, really. By the way, are you reading anything special right now?
I am reading, actually, I just finished a book and I don't even remember what it's called, but I'm actually reading fiction, which is not, you know me, I'm always reading the like spiritual books. I did just recently do like a third read of Byron Katie, Loving What Is, which is a great one. But now I am reading, I'm at a lake house right now, one of the gifts of recovery. I'm on vacation with my family, and I'm going to just read some bad fiction. So
I'm with you. I'm with you. A good distraction. Well, Kat, I'm going to thank you so much.